The flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Madam Secretary, would you do the roll call, please?
Mr. Anderson? Here. Mr. Jackson?
Here.
Mr. Kern?
Yeah.
Mr. McCucci?
Here.
Mrs. Mitchell?
Here.
Mr. Ochmanowitz?
Present.
Mrs. Weed?
Here.
Mr. Diliberto?
Here.
And Mr. Klein.
Here. Thank you. Brief announcement, this meeting is being recorded by the Board Secretary. And others. Okay, that brings us to the approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the October 24, 2019 meeting of the Board of School Directors of the Quakertown Community School District?
So moved.
Mr. Anderson, and seconded by Mrs. Mitchell. Discussion? No? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. That brings us to our first request for general public comment. Madam Secretary, has anybody signed up?
Mr. Del Rossi?
Please state your name and area of residence, please.
My name's George Del Rossi from Milford Township. Once again, we're here. My daughter Emma behind me here is a 9th grade homeschooled student with all the credentials to prove that she's in 9th grade, and she had to fight her way into the tech school because the school administration wasn't following their own policy. Since then, she attended the tech school. Once you guys voted to allow her in, she attended the tech school for over 8 weeks. Without missing a day, she maintained a 96 average and was described as a wonderful student with a wonderful work ethic. She also volunteered for the Fall Occupational Advisory Committee dinner. On the night before, she was kicked out of school. She was there until 9 o'clock that night. The very next day, we were informed via phone call, and the vice principal of the tech school was informed that she's not allowed to return to school. We got this without a meaningful explanation. We got a voicemail on the afternoon of the 25th that something along the lines that Emma's not allowed to tech school because she's only in 7th grade. We had no idea what this meant. We emailed Mrs. Pallone, who we were told gave the assistant superintendent the 7th grade information, to correct this. We were never given any opportunity to clarify her grade or to prove anything otherwise. Never discussed. She was kicked out of school and unenrolled from the tech, all because someone in the district randomly assigned her 7th grade with no evidence or authority. This all happened without ever speaking to the person who had all the evidence to make the proper decision, and that is her previous and current homeschool education supervisor, which would be my wife, who's standing behind me. Never a phone call, never an email. Just pulled her out of school. Okay. I'm here tonight to ask the board, because I've seen you do this previously with a young gentleman who was here at the last meeting who, due to extenuating circumstances, being an exchange student, there was no real language to explain his situation. And the language that the Quakertown School District has for this situation is pretty much non-existent.
Okay, Mr. Del Rossi, I'm going to ask you to stop right there, please. Mr. Garten, would you care to speak to the situation, please?
I'm not going to try to restrain the board from comments, but I will note that Mr. Del Rossi has indicated he's retained counsel and that litigation may be in the offing, and I would just want to advise the board to be careful in their comments.
Okay.
Okay. Your 3 minutes has expired, so unless,
Not, we have consulted with an organization that we belong to for homeschoolers that often will contact the board and other places, school districts, to clarify the homeschool positions. Because we, as homeschoolers, we have to know the law, but we don't expect the school districts to know the law.
okay.
And so that's what has happened. We did that before when you wouldn't allow her, and they sent a letter stating that you would, just clarifying the situation that homeschoolers are allowed to attend tech. And we did that for this situation too.
Okay.
And that's what your letter that you received stated.
We will continue, the administration will continue to work through the process with you on this.
But we're not,
No one's worked with us.
Okay.
Nobody's responded to us. All our emails, all our phone calls have gone unanswered. I had my daughter here who was not only going to school and enjoying it, but she was excelling. When we take a student out like that, I just can't believe that the district would be part of that.
We're aware of the situation.
Okay.
And as Mr. Garten suggested, we know that there's potential for litigation here. So I certainly am not going to comment any further on this.
Okay.
And I do not believe any of the board members will. So
so we are requesting tonight that you allow her to go back to the tech.
we're not prepared to make a decision on that yet. The administration is working through that. So thank you very much.
Well, can I ask one question, just for the record? How old is your daughter? She is 13. Thanks.
As we have records of when she started first grade in 2011, I have a transcript here, along with her placement test at that time. I have her placement test, which is her standardized test, which is required at the end of in 8th grade. I have all the proof to prove that
Independent evaluators.
I have
all the proof is
We
there.
really need to continue on with the meeting. So thank you.
So the board's position is to leave her out of school.
Out of the tech school.
The board's position is that we're not going to comment on that right now.
All right. That's just, I'm going to comment. That's just terrible. That's shameful. Shame on you.
Okay, any other public comment? Okay, moving forward. We have the superintendent's report. Dr. Harner?
Yes, sir. I believe we have a couple ladies who have a presentation to make.
We came up with the idea to wear pink at night to raise awareness for breast cancer. We went to Mr. Gottschalk with this idea. We decided to have all Natick students and adults wear pink on October 30th.
We decided to expand our idea by selling pink lemonade at a Race for Education event. Parents and family members come to this event, so we sold pink lemonade to the adults there. This helped raise money for the American Cancer Society.
We cannot do this all by ourselves. We used habit number 6, Synergize, to get help from other 5th graders to help organize this work. We made posters, bought lemonade, got other supplies, set up the lemonade stand, and handed out the lemonade. When we were finished, we raised over $60 to support breast cancer awareness.
Great job.
Mr. Gutschall, any further comments on their presentation? I'm sure you have a few words just briefly on that.
First and foremost, we're certainly proud of our Natick leaders. These 3 girls demonstrated all the leadership habits that we're looking for in all of the students in Quakertown, and they were respectfully relentless in their pursuit to help others and inspire greatness. That's our motto at Natick, is building a community of leaders who inspire greatness, and they're shining stars with that. So, girls, great job. We're very proud of you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay there. Have a seat 1 second. We have recognition of our high school art students. Okay. I'm being coached here. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to take a moment to recognize the students in our school district, and we had from Strayer as well, right? Or just high school? Okay. Students who participated in the Bucks County Students Art Expo, which was held at Central Bucks last week, or has it been 2 weeks already? So I just wanted to recognize those students for their great work. We certainly had some incredible art on display, and all of the school districts participated with either visual arts or performing arts that night, and it was a really great event. So thank you so much to our teachers who support the program. And if you could just stand for a moment, please, Ms. Christine, I would appreciate it. So we can give you a round of applause. Because in addition to the amazing student work, it takes a lot of effort to coordinate both the compilation of the art and the presentation of the art, and our display boards, I must say, looked wonderful. So, wonderful job.
Dr. Hoffman represented me at the Art Expo. This is the second year we've had a countywide art expo. Last year we were down the other end of the county, and next year it'll be, hopefully, it'll be up here in the northwest corner of the county, so you all get a chance to see it. They had performing arts, visual arts from all the districts, all 13 school districts in the county, celebrating what we offer in our public schools. Superintendent's report, you have a copy attached to under my logo there on board docs. I won't read it for you. I saw at the bottom of it what Lisa just reported out. Excuse me for that, was at the bottom of my page. There's a couple things I wanted to. Do you see the alignment that we have to our goals? But our most important purpose, our corporate purpose here as a school district, is to create a culture of teaching and learning. And our presentation tonight, it keeps with what we've been doing. We started at our last board meeting, and we'll continue on throughout the year, is bringing in our teachers and our school leadership to talk about what they're doing in their building. And so really excited tonight. We have Natick Elementary School. Scott Gutschall is the principal. He's going to introduce his team of teachers and coaches and things. And we have a presentation. Their presentation will last about 15, 20 minutes, and then we'll take questions afterwards.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Hunter and the board, thank you very much for allowing us to have this opportunity to share the great things that are happening at Natick. In a few moments, 5 of the teachers from our great team are going to come up and explain the process of how we're using data to inform our instruction and make a meaningful difference in the students' lives. And we're doing this to optimize instruction, boost student achievement and growth, and you're going to hear this pattern often, closing the achievement gap. Tonight's presentation, what you're going to see, we're going to be talking about our current data, live actual data right now, what the students produced for us, what we're doing about that, what we did about it yesterday, what we did today, and what we're doing tomorrow, and tomorrow, and what we're doing every single day. There's different ways of analyzing data, and throughout the school year, you're going to hear different schools giving different presentations about different forms of data. We're going to be talking about what's happening right now. At the end of this presentation, one of our goals is that you're going to walk away and say, this is a difficult process. We're focusing on literacy here, and teaching reading is an incredibly intricate process and challenging work. And we're excited to share that with you tonight. As you know, we're a Leader in Me school. Maybe you didn't know, we're one of 2 schools, along with Richland Elementary School here in Quakertown, that are the only 2 Leader in Me schools in Bucks and Montgomery counties. We're pretty proud of that. This process represents it's our operating system. Everything we do kind of runs through this process. And as you can see by this graphic, there are 3 big goals: teaching leadership principles, creating a leadership culture, and what we're going to talk about tonight, aligning academic systems. We've talked to you in the past about the habits, building these habits, helping students with their personal leadership skills. A major portion of the Leader in Me process is looking at our academic systems and looking at our academic growth. That's what we're going to share with you tonight. This next slide, what you're going to see here, you know the data systems that we use. There are many different forms of data, PSSA, NWEA, the rest of the list here. What we're going to talk to you tonight about mostly is the DIBELS 8 assessment. Our district has invested a lot of resources in this, in the DIBELS 8 assessments, and it's giving us excellent information about our students' learning. Again, most of the information you're going to see tonight comes to us about foundational reading skills. There's some data that you're going to see tonight that's a little eye-opening, and we're owning that, and we're saying, okay, this is where we are right now. Here's a plan to close that achievement gap. And a lot of it's based on this DIBELS assessment. So I'm going to turn things over to our intervention specialist, Mrs. Chrissy Wainwright. So Chrissy, come on up, please.
Hi there. So we're first going to talk a little bit about DIBELS 8. This assessment is called the Dynamic Indicators of Early Literacy Skills Assessment, and it is our universal screener. So every student in our building, K through 5, receives this takes this assessment 3 times a year, and it really is to track their foundational skills acquisition. So they take it at the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, and the end of the year. There are a variety of skills you see down the left-hand side. It starts in kindergarten. Our kindergarten teachers are here to explain phonemic awareness, how to manipulate the spoken sounds of language, which is really the first reading skill, all the way down to reading comprehension. So depending on the grade level, certain skills are chosen, and then basically DIBELS creates a composite score that gives the overall reading health of a child. So they also categorize students as, you're familiar with this from PSSA, above, benchmark, below, well below. So it gives us a good idea of where we're starting when it comes to these foundational skills. I'm going to also introduce Mrs. Stacy DeChico. She's our interventionist and coach as well.
So this slide shows our school-wide beginning of the year DIBELS data. It's all the students in our school were assessed on the DIBELS 8 in September. As you can see, well, let me take a step back here. So the green area is on the chart is on-level students. The blue is above level. The yellow is below level. And the red area is well below level. As you can see, 45% of our students are on level or above level. 55% of our students coming into school or into this year are below and well below. So it is kind of hard to stand here and share those results publicly. But we are owning this, and we have a lot of great plans in place, and we are closing gaps. This slide shows some more ways that we can look at data and analyze the trends, patterns that we see. We have a great program that was that's new this year, to my understanding, and it's called Link It. And there's many different things that we can do with this system. Basically, we have ways that we can pull data from grade levels. We can look at just REALA, ELA, and we can pull like DIBELS 8, we can pull the Fontes and Pennell guided reading assessment, all kinds of data to analyze those results. We can look across grade levels. We can pull data from one student over all the years. So this is a great tool that we can use to help, again, look at our trends to help us to come up with action plans. One of the this slide in particular shows on the top slide last year's data, only because I wanted to show you how the beginning of the year to the end of the year can look like. So we are comparing what students came in at starting last year, what they ended at, and so forth, and we did that across the K1 and 2. Something that we have been looking at through the Link It is that a lot of the students coming into kindergarten are coming in below level. Also, even though there has been a lot of improvement and we've had a lot of great teaching, there's a large amount of kids that are leaving without being on level as well. So that told us that we need to use a lot of our resources, and we are basically using a lot of our resources approaching kindergarten so that we can make sure that all students leaving kindergarten are on level, so that each year, the first grade teachers then can start with kids on level instead of always starting behind. So that's another way that we have a strong plan as a team to close the gaps. We are talking about data. That's what this presentation is about. One thing that we are always reminding ourselves about is that these data are numbers. They're very important numbers that drive our instruction. We also have little humans, and we are always reminding ourselves that we have little humans that we are trying to help, support, teach, and these are the faces of the children that we believe in.
So you've seen our baseline, and you've seen our challenge. And really, this is not new research. Third grade research tells us that students need to be reading by the end of third grade to really be on track. And I won't read that slide to you, but basically we feel an urgency and we feel a responsibility to this. So this is why we chose literacy and these foundational skills as our wildly important goal, because it is our responsibility.
Okay, up here you see information about wigs. Yep, my bald spot's getting bigger. I don't wear a wig. WIG is an acronym, stands for Wildly Important Goals. This is part of the Leader in Me process. One of the books that we're following is called The 4 Disciplines of Execution. Simply stated, this is about achieving goals. As humans, we're really good at coming up with goals. I'm really good at coming up with fitness goals. Do I always accomplish them? And do we always accomplish goals? Not always. This process is extremely helpful in delineating the goals and coming up with exactly what we need to do. So there's a process we follow to establish a building-wide WIG, a building-wide wildly important goal that filters down to a grade level wildly important goal, and ultimately comes down to a student WIG. Here is our NITIG building WIG for this year. Percentage of NITIG students with an at or above composite score on the DIBELS 8 assessment will increase from 45% to 65% by the end of the school year. So, this is another one of those uncomfortable moments, and I want to make sure I explain this appropriately. All students need to demonstrate growth. To go from middle of the year to the middle of the year, these expectations increase. Middle of the year to end of the year, these expectations increase. We are focused on achieving 100% proficiency. I want to make that very, very clear. We also deal with little humans who sometimes come to us with very difficult learning profiles. So taking all of that into account, this is a data-based goal that we're working for, and we're working to achieve proficiency with 100% of our students. That leads into, here you can see all of the grade level WIGs, and the grade levels work together by analyzing the data, working with our coach, working with our intervention specialist and the rest of the team to come up with exactly what they're working on per grade level. Tonight you're going to hear from our 2 kindergarten teachers, Mrs. Godshaw and Mrs. Peasy, and one of our 3rd grade teachers, Mrs. Klee. And they're going to talk about their WIGs and what exactly they're doing to address these learning gaps so that we can close that gap and move all students' achievement and growth.
So each grade level has really chosen a high leverage skill that they feel like will move their students forward at this precise time for them when it is so critical. So progress monitoring is an important piece of that. These are the frequent checks that happen over time, and not over great periods of time, but over weekly, bi-weekly, monthly periods of time. So the frequency is important, and it's based on the intensity of the intervention that the student's receiving. So M-Class and Amplify, the data platform that DIBELS 8 runs off of, has these great forms where we can give the same assessment with a different form, so it's valid, but we can check in on progress very frequently, and then we can use that to drive our instruction. We also use it to examine our instruction and decide if what we're using is working, and then make changes as a team to that as well. We also use this information and the beginning of the year information to allocate our resources. So when you have this, this narrow of a focus and we say this is the thing we're working on, we can use the people in our building, the people outside of the building who support us, everybody in our community of educators to support this one goal and put the people where the needs are so that we can see the most growth. And here's our kindergarten team, Mrs. Sarah Godshaw and Mrs. Kristen Peasy.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing us this opportunity to share what Kristen and I and all of NIDIG are doing with our data in our classrooms. So I am Sarah Godshaw. I teach an AM and a PM group of kindergartners, and Kristen teaches the full-day kindergarten program. As you'll see in the next few slides, we are very passionate about the data that we're presenting to you today because ultimately we're very passionate about our little group of students that we have in front of us on a daily basis. So the first slide that's presented in front of you is a data compilation of all of the assessments that were given at the beginning of the school year. So on the very left-hand corner are all of the early literacy skills that were assessed, and on the very top is the composite or the overall score that was indicated for all of the kindergarten students. So we sat down and we discussed based upon that data, based upon our building school-wide WIG, what we specifically as kindergarten teachers really wanted to focus on with this data and how we wanted to drive our specific instruction to meet the needs of our personal WIG and the building-wide WIG. So on the next slide is our specific kindergarten WIG. Kindergarten teachers, myself and Kristen, will increase the percentage of students making the end of the year benchmark goal for phoneme segmentation, which Kristen will highlight and touch upon more what phoneme segmentation is, to go from 19% of our students to 80% of our students by the end of the school year. So I don't know about you, when you think of the numbers 19 to 80, that is a very big jump. It's a challenge, we're not going to lie about that, but ultimately we want to take phonemic awareness, which is what our focus is, to help close that achievement gap. There's a great piece of research listed below, and we feel if we can close that early literacy gap right now in kindergarten, we can help support students as they move into the next grade levels, and they're going to be leaving our classroom with the secured skill.
Just to piggyback on that for a second, that 19%, something to keep in mind is that kindergartners come in with all sorts of backgrounds, and it's the one grade level that they don't have a consistent background on, that some of those kids have never been in a school setting, or some have gone to preschools and things. So some of them just simply need the exposure to these skills, whereas others do need a little bit more intense of an intervention. So what is phonemic awareness? A lot of people tend to think of it as phonics, but phonemic awareness is actually a big range of skills where it's the ability to hear the sounds in the words and be able to manipulate the spoken language without actually using text yet. So it's prior to actual phonics, which identifies the sounds with the letters. So you can see a different range of, or a great range of different phonemic awareness skills, from rhyming to syllables to individual phonemes, which are the individual sounds, isolating sounds such as the beginning sound, and then blending and segmenting. So the phoneme segmentation fluency is the assessment that we chose to focus on, and that's the student's ability to segment the individual sounds or the phonemes in a spoken word, and the assessment is given in 1 minute. And at the beginning of the year, another piece to consider is that these children have probably never had a time test before, so that, and they're often with someone who they're not familiar with, because it's not always the classroom teacher giving the assessment. So it's a comfort level thing, it's a learning to take a timed assessment thing, as well as the actual skill of segmenting phonemes. So what does that mean? I'm going to do what I do best and be a kindergarten teacher and teach you how to do this. So basically what it is we give them a word and they have to break down the sound. So if I were to say cat, they would have to say k, a, t. Whereas some of them might just say k. She's got it. So we start out usually with teaching them 2 sounds. So doing we, like w, e, and moving on to 3 sounds and 4 sound words as they get better. So it's just a fun little assessment. We try to make it as fun as possible. Like I said, sometimes they just start out with the beginning sound. Sometimes they can chunk it like k, at, instead of breaking apart each individual sound. But the more sounds they get, the more their score increases and the higher they get to proficiency. So as you can see, we take that information that we get from the assessments and the progress monitoring, and we break them into small groups using the district resources that are listed on the slide.
Okay. So we wanted to bring forth to you in person exactly what we're doing with that instruction and with that data, and we've provided some video clips of our students in action taking the phoneme segmentation fluency and putting it into practice. I can say coming into the beginning of kindergarten, these students were not able to do something like this. And in a few months, through the data collection, through the intervention process, through sitting down with the students and working them through what phoneme segmentation is, it's astounding what they're able to do and the confidence that they have in themselves being able to demonstrate it. Asher, tell me about this picture.
A fan.
It's a picture of a fan. Move your cubes and tell me the parts of the word fan. Awesome. What sound does the green cube say? What sound does the yellow cube say? What sound does the red cube say? And all together it says?
Fan.
Awesome.
I also have 2 videos of the same student doing a segmentation activity. You'll see in the first one, he's using a visual aid to help him, and it's within like a week or 2 later, he's already without the support. Oh, I did wrong.
Your word is ray. Go ahead and say ray.
Ray. Ray. Ray.
Let's try it again. Ready? Say ray.
Ray.
A.
Nice job. Ray.
We.
We. E.
So here's some of our progress monitoring data results. So as Chrissy had explained, progress monitoring is our way of checking in with these students. In full day kindergarten, we usually do it weekly just to keep up to date on what their progress is, what kind of growth they're making, and what areas we need to support, as well as switching up the groups to really individualize or focus on the needs of the students. So we meet as a team almost every week and are constantly making any little changes to our instruction, changes to the groups based on the students' needs. And Sarah's going to talk a little bit about the data.
So the data presented in front of you is from the beginning of the school year, and it also shows the progress monitoring that we've been tracking over the past couple of weeks. So we've taken a student who came in well below the benchmark level. We've chosen a student below benchmark level at the beginning of the school year, and we also chose a student who received the benchmark scoring for the beginning of the year. Purposefully to highlight, if you've had a chance to really look at that data, you can see in the red column looking straight down, all 3 of those students, despite their benchmark, are showing a need for the phonemic awareness piece for phoneme segmentation. So I can say honestly, it was a misconception that I had when I first looked at this data, seeing a student who received a benchmark score that they're not insecure in certain areas, but being able to take that data and see specifically, it's allowing us to know that we really need to focus on that phonemic awareness. So over the past couple of weeks, we've progress monitored these students, and you can see they're working towards progressing to reach that next benchmark point at the middle of the year. The beginning of the year, the middle of the year, and the end of the year expectation also increases. So it's going to have to allow the students to really demonstrate their ability as they progress throughout the school year to reach each individual benchmark. And lastly, for kindergarten, we spent a lot of time talking about us as the teacher and what we're doing specifically with our data in the classroom and with the student support team. But we're also really excited because we are a leader in Me School, and we are working on empowering our own students to become self-motivated to track their own progress. So we've all been working on starting leadership binders in our classroom. Kristen and I actually just started it this week. And we've been sitting down with our students and we've been talking with them about how they're doing so they're able to track what they're doing in the classroom. We've told them where they came in at the beginning of the school year and where they are now, and they go back to their leadership notebooks, and not only for literacy skills but also for other math skills that they're working on to reach their end of the year kindergarten goals. They're able to track their progress. And I can speak on behalf of myself and probably Kristen. They're becoming intrinsically motivated to see what they couldn't do at the beginning of the school year and what they can do now. So it's really neat to allow them the opportunity to take this data and put it into a 5- and 6-year-old's mind and track what they're doing. So thank you very much for allowing us the opportunity to share with you how great kindergarten is.
It's our world. And next up, third grade teacher Joanne Clee.
Yeah, which one? This red one? Right click. Okay. Good evening. Third grade's a little different, obviously, than our kindergarten teachers. We actually, if you take a look at the slide, we have 2 specific areas that we highlighted when we looked at our data in third grade. We looked at our reading fluency, and we also looked at, that one is in between the letter sounds and the decoding. And I'll get a little bit more into that as we go on, because our third grade WIG is to increase our oral reading fluency from 59% to 75%. And that simply means they're going to read words accurately, they're going to read words fluently. And when you think about third grade, you think, okay, they're going to read and they're going to become better readers. But when we really looked at that data, we saw a huge, I'm sorry, we're going to go back here, a huge deficiency in our third grade students where they couldn't read letters, sounds, and we had to go back to the phonics. So if you look at it, says NWF and ORF. The ORF stands for oral reading fluency, and that's where we're going to focus. The NWF is actually nonsense word fluency. And you might think, well, geez, nonsense word fluency. Yes, nonsense word fluency is the student's ability to attach a sound to a letter. And if they can't do that in third grade, how are we going to be able to get them to read fluently? So in third grade, we really have been working first and foremost of making sure that they are able to take the sounds that corresponds with the letters and the blends and then put them together into words so that they can be like, now I can read this. And it was truly eye-opening as third grade teachers to have so many students come to us that couldn't do this. So that was a real aha moment and a real focus for us. And it has been actually a wonderful experience. We have win time in the district, and during that time, we have specific skills that we have found in our data, and we support each child. We drill down all of the scores that you saw that the kindergarten teachers had shown you, and we look to see, okay, this group of students really has difficulty with this skill, and this student has difficulty with this skill. So we put smaller groups together, and this is where we provide our interventions. We use lots of different things. We use our Wit and Wisdom curriculum to work on our fluency with our children. We use a lot of the Amplify lessons that come from our M class. And then we also do other lessons and work with other children with the reading fluency as well. We have some options, and I have a few little activities to show you. I won't make you do anything, don't worry. Our nonsense words, this is what we're asking our children to do. So if you look at that first column, we have some 3-letter words that are nonsense. But as I was working with a group of kids today, I said, they kind of like, Mrs. Clee, these aren't real words. They're not. But I said, we need to make sure that you're understanding the letter sounds and things and put them together. And to watch their faces figure this stuff out it's so rewarding to see. And in just a few short months to see the growth that some of our kids have made. So we work on our nonsense words. Some of our other things there, we have an axe there. It's another activity to help the kids break apart the words so that every time they made a new sound, they would chop after every sound. But it really has helped them then bring the words together and become more fluent. So I want to show you, this is one of my students who has made tremendous growth within the school year. His composite score was a 315, which brought him in below level. But if you take a look at the different areas, reading fluency was still below, but his reading accuracy was benchmark. And just like Mrs. Godshall said, we had to pick it apart even more. Nonsense words were very, very difficult for him. But if you can see his scores, they have increased, and he's only been progress monitored once or twice. His has made a significant impact or an increase in his scores just by realizing what he needs to work on. And he's really working hard, which is a lot of fun. The second slide is a little girl who her composite score was below, but she had all scores that were well below in a lot of our different areas. But if you look at the way as she's progress monitoring, her top 2 scores have increased pretty significantly. She's done a pretty good job of working with her fluency and her accuracy. As Mr. Gottschalk or Mrs. DeChico had said, we know the data is what we're working with, but these are children that we're working with. And when we talk about all of the different backgrounds that these children come with, this is a child specifically that I know has been through some trauma. So the fact that she's, increasing in one area and not in the other, I understand where, maybe that morning or maybe that night she, came in with some different things in her brain and it was a tough day. So she's still increasing, she's still making some progress, but it's things that we need to continue to work on. So we don't always look at the data, we have to look at the child and what's in front of us. And then that's...
So we wish that we could have our whole team here with us tonight, and we wanted to honor the work that other grade levels are doing, because truly we have a whole team of people back at the school. We have classroom teachers. Our itinerants are working on this in whatever ways that they can get it in. Our instructional aides have been just fabulous. They've been just listening and learning and saying, like, I'll help, let me do this. And they deserve all the credit in the world as well. So, and other specialists in the building who couldn't be here tonight. So we wanted to honor them by showing some data, but I won't talk you through all of it. Just know that we are so proud. We really are just so proud of this data and to see our kids growing in this way and to have it tangible and right in front of us so that we can use it to really take the next step in an educated way for our kids. So I'm just going to breeze through some of this, and then Mrs. DeChico is going to join me again.
And then this is our last section and part of our presentation, and this is our data wall. And our data wall is in our conference room, and as you can see, there's grades K through 5 at the top. We have all of our students' names and their composite scores on that wall. As you can see, looking at the bottom part, there's red and then moving up yellow and then green. And this wall drives our data meetings. We have data meetings more formally every 6 weeks. In addition to that, grade levels, teachers are always meeting with each other daily, a couple times a week, depending on the needs. We're constantly progress monitoring, as we talked about, readjusting, but we are having our more formal meetings every 6 weeks. During that time, we use this wall to guide us, like I said, and one way that we use this is through celebrations. We look at growth, and we look at every kind of growth. Sometimes the growth might not actually move a child from one area to another, but growth is growth, and we're always moving forward, and we discuss that. With that, there's some coaching questions that we ask different teachers, and it might be questions such as, what instructional methods are yielding the strongest outcomes? And teachers will speak to that, and we all share as a team what's working. We also talk about what skills do students still need to master. What do we need to do differently? If something's not working, obviously we're not going to keep doing it. We're going to try something different. So it brings on, it helps with a lot of great conversation. It's very proactive, very solutions oriented, and we really work as a team, pull together to help support all of our students. And then the last section is Scott again.
Yeah, I'll finish up here. Again, I have to reiterate that I'm super proud of all of the NIDIG students. They're working really hard. It's focused instruction, it's focused learning, and we're proud of their growth. And super proud of this team and all of the teachers at NIDIG, because it's changing some things that we're doing. And this process of aligning academics and empowering instruction is something that is leading to some very difficult conversations at NIDIG, but those difficult conversations are yielding positive results. Really proud of our team. So thank you for your patience today, and thank you for going through this conversation. There are those 392 smiles there who are inspiring greatness, and that's why we do this, and we're really proud of them. So at this time, if you have some questions for our team.
I do. I have a couple.
Okay.
This is directed. No, I do have a question. Do you guys note a difference? You said you're all day kindergarten and you're half day. So do the kids in your section progress slower than the kids that are there all day? Do you see a difference in those kids and how they're moving through this metric?
I would say the main difference is, as you could probably guess, almost all of mine were well below grade level at the beginning of the year. However, they are in school all day, so it does open up a little bit more opportunity to give them the interventions that they need. However, the team has really worked well with the half-day students as well to provide opportunities for them. I don't know if there's anything else you want to
I would agree with everything that Kristen shared. I certainly have some students who we're keeping a very close eye on, who are exhibiting some difficulties, but we have a lot of interventions in place for those students, and we have a great plan with our support team. So,
including they have added the extended day program. I'm not sure if everybody's aware of that, but some students do either stay longer from AM for a little extra additional support or come in early for PM.
And I was wondering how you own the data from before kindergarten, right? I think you own the data. It's almost like you start at first grade because they come in the door at kindergarten. So how do you own how they walk through the door as being sort of your core? I think that's just sort of the starting point, right? As opposed to saying that this is our problem at kindergarten. I think you start owning it a year into it, maybe 2 years into it.
And yes, and we do, excuse me. What I'd say too is we do have the opportunity in the district. We have 2 preschool programs at POF and at Richland. So the students are learning pre-K skills, leading them into kindergarten. It's also an opportunity for us to establish some strong partnerships, maybe with other pre-K programs, to look at the skills that are necessary to enter into kindergarten.
Also, Kelly Kramer, I believe, sends out an early intervention or early childhood newsletter to a lot of the preschools as well in the area.
Our district strategy over the last 6 years has been to we started out with full day K in 2 buildings. We went to 4 for many years. This is the first year you approved an additional teacher at the beginning of this school year when we added a full day K at POF. 5 years ago, we were approved for a pre-K counts grant, and we, in partnership with Lifespan, so we have 2 pre-K programs. So they're the students that are come in a pre-K level that are assessed at the lowest possible level, the lowest 30, 15 in each program come into those programs. You've approved for building the new Nidec Elementary School to have 1 pre-K classroom. We're hoping that and fully expecting next year to have that filled with a Head Start program from the IU. So we'll have the opportunity to have our lowest 45 students out there. May not be the lowest 45 because we can't find them. They have to come into us, and we've advertised for all that. So then our strategy is full day K, and we know from research you don't need full day K for everybody. That's an expensive proposition. We don't have enough classrooms to do all that. But we know if we do the full day K strategy correctly, then we have summer school for those who are still behind. Then they come into first grade. Then we have summer school for those who are still behind after first grade, and so on, to get to what the trend you've heard from the Trumbowersville kindergarten teachers and these teachers and their principals, that by end of third grade, they got to be reading at grade level. That's our objective, and that's been in the past one of our important metrics here at the district office.
So let me ask, has this been going to Dibbles, been 2 years or something like that?
Last year, we used Dibbles Next, which
Dibbles
was
Next.
an earlier version of this. Now we have Dibbles 8. It's an upgraded version of, and we think a better assessment product.
So does the data and your experience with the kind of the rigor of this new program match the eye test? Like, what I mean by that is, little Billy, really did increase greatly through doing XYZ process. Like, is it?
Great question. Great question. So, Dibbles, is that assessing what the Ready Gen or Wit and Wisdom will be assessing? Not necessarily. Dibbles is really giving us that picture of the foundational skills that students need to build upon to reach those deeper levels of meaning and deeper levels. So it's helping us align our systems. I think it's giving us outstanding data to make sure that students are ready for the high levels of instruction that are happening with Wit and Wisdom, because it's rigorous.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of fascinating that it seems to be breaking down your practice, so to speak, into components. But sometimes part of me always questions the decomposition. Does it actually re-yield the whole? So is there actual proof that this sort of decomposition of these little chunks will matriculate to the right end result? Has this been going on 5 years somewhere else, and wow, look at the awesomeness, and we're doing it too, versus this is the first time anybody's done it?
The beauty of it is that one skill moves to the next skill. So when we say you're moving from the phonemic awareness all the way to comprehension, the skills really are in a continuum. So you can see how the phonemic awareness skill, once students have acquired that, it really does help them with decoding words in phonics, which really then helps them be automatic enough to read with fluency so that it sounds like talking, so that they can understand as they read. And then that's where the comprehension piece comes in. So that's why we call it building blocks, because it really does, one feeds into the next, feeds into the next. And when we speak about gaps, if one is missing, then we find that kids will break down later when they try to comprehend, but they're not fluent. It might be because they're not comfortable at the word level yet, and we have to go back and practice something. So we're hoping that this assessment helps us catch those gaps quicker so that we can make sure that everybody has what they need to get to that proficiency level where they can manage, our curriculums that are rigorous.
And one thing that we didn't mention is that some of the kids are already at benchmark or higher. They've already reached those foundational skills. Obviously, we're going to keep moving them forward. We're going to keep teaching that to them. But some of those kids that are already there, we're working with those deeper comprehension skills. And that's where a lot of the, the teachers are doing a lot of different that's where the curriculum comes in, the wit and the wisdom and the ready gen, and that's where the coaching's coming in. As I am half-time coach, and I'm in a lot of the classrooms working with some strategies called signposts, and we're doing some great lessons on comprehension skills and delving deeper into all of that. So that's, we're, a lot of the kids, when they're achieving those, we are closing those gaps, but we always are obviously, working on what the next skills are for them, challenging everyone.
And I think that your question is really directed towards the high. Like, when you said that, I was like, that's us. That's third grade right there. Because once you hit third grade, there's supposedly reading. We work into the higher level thinking. But what we have found, and the reason that the kids, the students in front of us haven't been able to increase the way we've wanted them to increase, is because we have found that they have these deficiencies that we weren't expecting them to have. And so it's our goal, since we've now started this and the new foundations that they have in the younger grades, our goal is, hey, maybe in 2 years, I won't have to have small groups of kids learning how to break apart words the way that they're doing in first and second grade, because then I can work on even higher level thinking, because my kids are already there, and then they can just keep going. So that, as soon as you said that, I thought, well, that's our goal in third grade this year, especially because we're hoping that's
because your giant red line at the top. I wrote down 2 years from now, we'll be good to see the incoming third graders not having that because of the work you're doing right now.
And that is what our
fingers crossed, right?
Exactly, and that is our goal. That is exactly our goal.
And I also want to offer praise. There's a couple things you're doing that are pretty awesome that remind me a lot of other industries. You talked about. I wrote it down as you're reducing the gap in time between doing something and getting feedback. You're not waiting 12 months, 6 months, 3 months, right? And that's a powerful way to change anything. You could take it to extremes, but that's good. And the other thing that I guess I was a little curious about is you have a combination of process and one-on-one, and so I would imagine some of your feedback and some of your talks at the data. I love data walls. I love data visualization, right? Having that kind of thing. But I think I would imagine some of what you do might be, we need to tweak the process, and other things might be, we need one-on-one with this. And I just kind of wondered what capacity do you have for, that could be overwhelming. I don't know. It's not a very well articulated point, other than it seems like, wow, you can approach it a couple ways. Let's fix the process and then try to improve that way. And other things are, wow, geez, we got to get these five kids really one-on-one. But if there's too many one-on-one, anyway, it seems like, you do a really amazing stuff, and it's really hard. So I kudos. But I'll stop.
You kind of confused me too. I was like, wait a minute.
Was that an example of nonsense word fluency, John?
Yeah. That was good, Steve. I was listening. Great presentation. Of course, I'm biased. This is like my kid's school, so I'm so proud to have you guys representing NIDIG. My son is in kindergarten, and he's actually in Mrs. Godshall's classroom, and I have seen such a transformation in him in just a short period of time. It used to be kind of frustrating to work with him because he just didn't want to listen to mom, I'm done with this, mom. And he'd fall into the chair, I'm like, oh my gosh. But he's so excited about learning now. And all day he wants to, sound out words, and this word starts with this. And he has taken advantage of the program, the Title I program, where he gets the extended day. And I think that has been just tremendous. I didn't even know about that before this year. So the great thing also I like is that I got a report back that says these are all the things, and that helps me as a parent to be able to reinforce what you guys are doing. So great job, and I can say from personal experience, it's really helped.
Thank you all very much. That was an awesome report.
I'd like to bring your attention back to the superintendent's report. There's a lot of really neat information, things that our teachers, our faculties have been participating in, some of the activities, Veterans Day and all. But Lori, would you come up and introduce Jacob Lewis and speak a little bit about what he was doing? And that'll be the last part of the superintendent's report.
So this is Jacob Lewis. He's a freshman at the high school. And last week, he was one of 13 students that were chosen to be in the Bucks County Arts Expo at CB South. I have been very impressed with Jacob's talents. And he was one of very few ninth graders that presented at CB South. So I just wanted to say thank you very much. Thank you for his parents and him coming tonight. And I'm extremely proud of Jacob and the rest of our students that were represented there last Wednesday.
What kind of media?
Do you want to talk to that? Or graphite pencil, right?
Like, basically, we drew like a 3D, like, not rendering, but like on paper, we use graphite pencils to draw a crunched up can, like a soda can. Just using shading.
That's cool.
It is cool. It is. He did a wonderful job. Yeah.
Awesome.
And he's also one of very few students that chose to take the opportunity to go in our T-shirt contest for the Sea of Blue T-shirt that is going to be at the Thanksgiving and Penridge football game on Thanksgiving. So we're waiting anxiously to hear back whether or not Jacob's design was chosen for the T-shirt. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir, that completes the superintendent's report.
Thank you, sir. All right, next we have our student representative, and this meeting, it is Emily Masiri. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, you did.
Thank you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and proceed with your report?
Okay, so I'm currently a junior at Quakertown High School, and today I just wanted to discuss a little bit of student life at the high school. So to start with the academics, Quakertown offers a plethora of classes ranging from CEP to honors to AP, as most of you know. And this year, Quakertown has achieved a record high number of signups for AP exams, exceeding 800. And Quakertown has also added a new AP course, AP Spanish Literature, which I am currently taking. And this course allowed me and several other of my peers to further our language studies, as AP Spanish Language was the last possible option for a Spanish course. And I just believe that the students here excel academically because we have very comfortable classroom and thorough lessons, and teachers and students here have the innate ability to create a beneficial environment for learning. And students are both challenged and supported to achieve their academic goals and help prepare them for their future through various programs. And moving on, Quakertown offers many extracurricular activities, such as Theater Club, which is actually hosting a new play tonight and tomorrow called Almost Maine. The cast is full of high school students eager to participate in the arts, and more clubs include TSA, which focuses on STEM topics, and FBLA, which focuses on business. And these clubs bring students together to dive deeper into those topics, and they will be attending upcoming competitions on regional, state, and national levels. And FBLA recently sent out some members, including myself, Elizabeth Hilton, Nicole Chambers, and Nicholas Seimer, to attend an employer summit at Bucks County with Dr. Harner, Mrs. Frisch, and our principal, Mr. V, in which we learned about the ins and outs of employment. And to continue, clubs including Student Council, Key Club, Best Buddies, Minithon, Q-Rock, and the National Honor Society all work together to create a fun school environment and contribute to the Quakertown community outside of the school, too. For example, Student Council is currently working on a Marvel-themed pep rally in preparation for the Thanksgiving game, and this will increase our school spirit. And Key Club is currently organizing a food drive to help those in need within our community. Furthermore, the Quakertown High School also has a strong athletic program. Fall sports, with the exception of football, who still has their game against Penridge, they all have officially ended, and winter sports are starting up now. And regarding athletics, our school recently hosted a powder puff tournament to raise money for cancer research, which many students participated in. The winning team was all composed of juniors, and it involved Kara Cruz, Grace Wilson, Paige Russell, Jordan Basili, Haley Gordon, Kayla Smith, Stephanie Friel, Kira DeFeo, Corey Purcell, Natalie Riley, Morgan Sipple, and Rachel McCorney. And lastly, I would like to add that our school recognizes academic performance, effort in classrooms, and positive behaviors with rewards including Student of the Month, which was awarded to Hannah Bile in October, as well as Q-Rock winners. This gives students something to work for and accomplish while also creating a better school environment. Thank you for your continued support at Quakertown High School.
Thank you very much. Nice report. All right, moving on to the standing committee reports.
One last thing for Ms. Masiri is, might want to ask her how our last year's student representative was her sister, how she's doing.
Oh.
Lizzie Masseri loves West Point right now, and she's constantly texting me about it. And I think she wants me to go with her.
The blonde? The blonde?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, all right.
No soccer.
Soccer.
She was a soccer player. Friends with my daughter. I know this.
It seems we know somebody else that went to West Point around here.
Oh. Favoritism.
Beat Navy, sir.
Yes.
Wow.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right, next is our standing committee reports, and Mrs. Weed will start with the policy committee report.
All right, the minutes from October 17, 2019 Policy Committee meeting were shared at the October 24th board meeting, and the next Policy Committee meeting will be held next Thursday, November 21st at 6:30 p.m. at the district office for any of you who are interested in. And an update of special note, which will be debated and discussed, I'm sure, tonight, is Policy 617. It's on student debt, and it's up for a second reading and approval tonight. After review by our solicitor, no changes are required of this policy since its first reading. But Policy 808, which is the operations policy, will be under review at the next board committee meeting next week for clarification of student meal debt and how it is handled through the business office. And that's my report.
Thank you, Mrs. Weed. Next is the facilities committee. Mrs. Mitchell?
Okay, thank you. Just bear with me because I actually was not able to attend this meeting, but I do have some notes here that I'm going to share with you all. And if you, after I'm done this, if you want to chime in, because you were present that meeting, right? Okay. So as many of you know, our student enrollment is continuing to fall in Quakertown, and that is a pattern that we see across the country, also Bucks County. Our enrollment decreased by 50 students, more than expected this year, with a projection of more than 100 fewer students for the 2020-2021 school year. Enrollment is declining substantially and on a fast downward trend. Live birth data was presented, and it was the lowest in 2018 since 1978. A shrinking student population could have an impact on our facilities, and we discussed how previously community committees worked to develop their recommendations for the board's use of facilities. In addition, there was a master decision matrix used by the elementary reassignment committee, and it allowed that committee to quickly see the positive and negative impacts of their choices. So just to give you an idea, we are looking at, depending on the trends, if they continue, how that could change the way that we are utilizing our facilities. While the elementary reassignments committee was a volunteer committee, Nancy Ann, Mrs. Edwards, said that the board may want to consider having each school director choose 2 committee members, with one being an alternate. And I actually like that idea. So we can maybe bring in some different voices. Chris Spear attended that meeting, and he will be on the board as of next month, and he was concerned about limits on the options a committee would have to choose from. He also wanted to know if adding 6th graders would call for the use of mobile classrooms. And we don't believe that as of now would be the case. So next year's committee would be able to consider all of these different options and give recommendations to the board. Our custodial services for SSC, the contract is expiring at the end of the school year, and they provide the district with custodial services, as mentioned before. And so far, we believe that they've done a really outstanding job. The recommendation would be to extend the contract for 3 years on a year-to-year basis. An update on Neidig Elementary School project. Mr. Spatafora gave a short presentation on the renovation and addition project, and everything is still on track. And in our December discussion, we will include furniture for the new buildings, and Principal Gottschalk will be invited to speak about discussions he's been having with the teachers. And I believe that is all for my report, unless you have anything to add, sir.
No, I think you covered it all. Well
All right.
done. Thank you. Next is the HR Negotiations Committee. Mr. Jackson.
We are currently in talks with the QUESPA support staff union, renewing their contract. We're making progress because we just talked about simple things today, nothing specific to offer, but everything's going swimmingly. So I'll have another meeting coming up next week, I believe, or shortly. So that's really all I have to say about that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jackson. And finally, a Goals Committee update from Mr. Kern.
Thank you. We met Tuesday, I think. I need to send an update out to everybody like I did the last time, more promptly. But we basically we reviewed where we were the last time, since it's always good to recap. We remind ourselves of the mission, the vision of the school district. We discussed the process a little more succinctly, and I actually started to document how do we get from a goal that gets sort of passed down in many ways throughout the buildings. You saw some of that in the presentation from the teachers, how they care about multiple levels, student, building, et cetera. So we talked a little bit about that. So it became pretty interesting, and we made a first pass at what I would say was just trying to rewrite, blending two of the sections that we collapsed. We collapsed two cultures into one, and we just made a first pass just to test out the waters of what does it take to write a single sentence goal. So I'll send that out, but just to give us a little sense of the challenge that it is, and something that we'll face December. I think we'll have another meeting, and then January we'll be kicking it off in earnest. But so we made some progress, and again, a lot of the value was actually the conversations, because we frankly didn't produce a lot. So we got to make it sound like there was value in something.
Thank you, Mr. Kern. Okay, that brings us to the President's report, and we have a PSBA recognition, and I'd like to read something here briefly, if you'll bear with me. This is the history of the Honor Roll of School Board Service. The legacy of the school board service is firmly embedded in the history of our nation and its commitment to public education. The Pennsylvania School Boards Association, founded in 1895, has a rich history as the first school boards association established within the United States. The consummate board member is described as an ethical, principled individual with a deep desire to serve. School directors have a strong belief in the value of public schools and local control of public education for the benefit of all students. Today, school districts are expected to offer more services along with world-class instruction with limited resources. These expectations provide a tremendous challenge for school directors who are unpaid volunteers who work tirelessly, giving of their free time away from their families to contribute to the schools and the communities that they serve. PSBA has been recognizing the contributions of dedicated local school directors with long-term service since 1983. The Honor Roll is the association's way of saying thank you to those individuals who exemplify leadership by giving unselfishly of their time and talents for the betterment of public schools, serving students across this great commonwealth. It gives me immense pleasure to recognize you for your service, for being a part of this rich legacy, Mr. Dwight Anderson.
Speech. Mr. Anderson, that is for you. Congratulations.
Bet you weren't expecting that tonight, were you? Would you like to say anything? Okay. Okay, this brings us to public comment on the fiscal items being presented for a vote tonight. Okay, moving on to the fiscal agenda. On the agenda tonight, A is General Obligation Bonds Series A of 2020 Parameters Resolution. B is the roll call vote for approval of the Parameters Resolution authorizing issuance of General Obligation Bonds Series A of 2020. C is General Obligation Bonds Series of 2020 Parameters Resolution, followed by D, another roll call vote for the approval of the resolution for issuance of the GOB Series 2020. And then E is approval of the Boucher and James bills list from October of 2019. So, we have two roll call votes, Mr. Garten. How should we proceed from here?
Separately.
Do them separately, okay. So first I need a motion for A on the agenda, which is the General Obligation Bonds Series A of 2020 Parameters Resolution.
So moved.
Mr. Akmanowitz.
Second.
Second, Mr. Jackson. Discussion?
So are these for finishing NIDIG or just what else?
The first one, the Series A, the first motion is for the third round of NIDIG. The other one is a refinance option from debt that we took on, I think, in 2012.
The refunding at current estimates saves about $140,000 net to the district. Because we've used up your BQ limit for 2019, we have to wait till 2020 to issue those bonds. So we could issue them in January for settlement in January. And the new money, you authorize proceeding with an issuance of up to $6.6 million. The parameters is for $8 million because remember, parameters is always bigger than the actual amount, so we can get your debt service level overall at the end of the day.
Thank you. Okay. All those in favor? And I just asked you that.
Mr. Klein.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Mr. Jackson.
Yes.
Mr. Kern.
Yes.
Mr. Klein.
Yes.
Mr. Akmanowitz.
Yes.
Ms. Weed.
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell.
Yes.
Mr. McCucci.
Yes.
Mr. Diliberto.
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0.
Thank you. Next is the General Obligation Bonds Series of 2020 Parameters Resolution. Do I have a motion to accept the General Obligation Bonds Series of 2020 Parameters Resolution?
So moved.
Mr. Anderson.
Second.
Mr. Akmanowitz. Discussion? Okay. Madam Secretary?
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Mr. Jackson.
Yes.
Mr. Kern.
Yes.
Mr. Klein.
Yes.
Mr. Akmanowitz.
Yes.
Ms. Weed.
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell.
Yes.
Mr. McCucci.
Yes.
And Mr. Diliberto.
Yes.
Motion passes 9 votes.
Okay, that brings us lastly to the approval of the Boucher and James bills list from October of 2019. Do I have a motion to approve the Boucher and James bills list from October of 2019?
So moved.
Mr. Anderson, second?
Second.
Second, Mrs. Weed. Discussion? All those in favor of approving the fiscal agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstention.
One abstention, so motion passes unanimously with one abstention. This brings us to the fiscal consent agenda. On the agenda, A is approval of budget transfers for June of 2019. B is approve budget transfers for October of 2019. C is approval of the October 2019 bills list. D is approve agreement with the BCIU to issue annual homestead/farmstead notices. E is agreement with Lehigh University for graduation in 2020. That's Stabler Arena, by the way. F is approve the PennServe plan agreement for retirement plan administrative services for plans 403B and 457B, subject to the solicitor's review. G is approve Bucks County Intermediate Units Cooperative Services fuel bid. Do I have a motion to accept the fiscal consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Jackson and second, Mrs. Mitchell. Discussion.
I want to give kudos to the administration for getting back in the Stabler Arena again this year. Let's hope we can keep that tradition going.
Awesome.
Okay.
What's that? Is that just like the TPA service, Zach?
All right. All those in favor of accepting the fiscal consent agenda as presented, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. This brings us to the public comment on the human resources items being presented tonight. Okay. Moving on to the human resources consent agenda, we have professional staff, support staff, and unit pay. Do I have a motion to accept the human resources consent agenda as presented?
Moved.
Mrs. Weed, second.
I'll second it.
Mr. Anderson, discussion? All those in favor of accepting the human resources consent agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. This brings us to public comment on the Office of Teaching and Learning items presented for a vote tonight. Okay, the Office of Teaching and Learning consent agenda. We have approval of textbooks, approval of program studies. Do I have a motion to accept the Office of Teaching and Learning consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Mr. Anderson.
Second.
Ooh. That was.
That was a tie. Who gets it?
Sorry, John Kern's closer, so. Discussion?
Mitch, do you approve of the physics book?
Yes, it's quite...
Gigantic.
Yes, it is. You could kill somebody with it, actually.
I like to throw a red I'm throwing a red flag. I like to go back and review who actually said it first.
It's true. We got 3 video sources.
Challenge on the field.
Dr.
I don't see the flag.
Mr. Klein, I'd like to have Dr. Hoffman make comments on the program of studies.
Sure, by all means, thank you. Dr. Hoffman?
Thank you, I appreciate it. I just wanted to call your attention to a few things. We did discuss this at the last Education Committee meeting, but I just wanted to make sure that we made a few of the changes clear so that everyone knew exactly what was changing between this year's program of studies and next. The first changes are that we put back into the program of studies previously approved courses that I am sorry to admit that we have been running for a number of years without them actually being written in the program of studies. So we're just rectifying that. Students are enrolled in internship classes and also field study classes when they are out working in the community or working through internships with local businesses. And we do grant them credit if they meet certain criteria, having a portfolio, a certain number of hours, letters from the people who they're working with. So it's not just, students can go out and do what they like. They do have some requirements to earn that credit. But as I said, it's been approved, and we've been doing it at least, I've been here since 2010. We've been at least doing it since 2010, but we're rectifying that by actually putting them back in the program of studies. The second change is that a number of years ago when we redid our social studies alignment, we removed world cultures, which was the old class that junior level students were taking, and replaced that with U.S. history too. So this is just progressing through that change from a couple years ago. And the most notable difference that you'll see, which was the bulk of our conversation at the last Education Committee, is the changes to the music classes, courses, and descriptions. And unfortunately tonight those aren't quite ready for you. So while I am seeking approval of the program of studies, there's a little asterisk there that asks if I could have a little bit more time until December to get those class names and descriptions correct. I did take the opportunity to meet with the secondary music teachers with Mr. Evans on November 6th and asked them if we could kind of work together to come up with a plan that everyone would be happy with. I know that over the last couple years we've had a little bit of a disagreement maybe between my office or the administration in general and the music department. And so I wanted to try to approach it a little differently and have a meeting with them before we made any decisions to see if I could get some input. I thought that the meeting went well. we certainly are coming at this from two different perspectives, which I think causes sometimes a little bit of concern, but I thought that we got to a good place where at the high school they did agree to add an additional music class for students and to start to brainstorm some electives that we could offer to increase our music opportunities for students beyond just formal band and chorus. I shared that my perspective is that I would love to see many more students involved in music in our schools, and we have a lot of students who may not want to be in a performance ensemble, but they may want to learn the piano, or they may want to learn music composition or music theory. And as a public school, I believe very strongly that those are things that we should be offering our students. We did get into a great conversation about our strings program. And as many of you know, that was also a topic that has come up over time. And this year, we reached the 110 student mark in our second year of the program, which far exceeds where we thought we would be. But I think that having 60 students as third graders who now have a choice of an instrument is really to be celebrated, that we had that large of a population of students who wanted this. And so the music teachers actually, and I have Mr. Evans here to tell you how this came about. The music teachers actually asked if we could start to have some conversation about hiring an additional music teacher earlier than we had thought. And I think that part of their conversation still comes from the fact that there is some hurt over the fact that we didn't replace the music teacher who was doing some of the middle school classes. Now, a lot of that comes out of the conversation that we had with parents at the education committee around the idea of sectionals, and I don't know that that we're necessarily prepared to tackle that right now, which is why we are asking for a little bit more time to get some idea on the direction of how we want that to go in the future. But what they are asking for is an additional person to help support partially some of the students who are in strings, but also to increase the number of courses that we're offering at the middle school level and at the high school level. So I just wanted to let you know that our idea would be that that would hopefully come out of existing staff as our enrollment is changing, that it wouldn't be a new position added to the budget. It would just be a reallocation of a person or an FTE to change into that. But I just wanted to let you know that was one of the things that came out of our conversation. They are aware that that I would be telling you all that they are very passionate about keeping the sectional time the way that they have it and wanting to maintain that. I shared my view on needing to find a balance with that and the courses that we offer for students. So that's why you'll see that big asterisk in there. So I'm sorry that that's not ready for this evening. But the last piece that I want to share is that we did have a great conversation about adding pathways into our program of studies this year and then into the future. This is something that I'm very excited about. I'm working on a committee at the county level for working on ways that we can target our instruction to students to help them make better plans for their future. So it's not just to get them college and career ready, but to really get them thinking about what they may want to do 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the line, and adjusting our program of studies in the future so that we can better meet their needs. If you think about it like a college, where the first 2 years are kind of taking your general classes, and then you kind of get more specific your junior and senior year, that would be the same case for our high school students. Right now, and working with the high school, we've identified 4 career pathways for our students, and they are business, marketing, and finance. That's one. STEM and computer science, arts and humanities, and education and training. So the goal would be that students would take the required classes that we have to through the state, and then we would get them more focused into some courses that may actually help them decide if that's a pathway that they're interested in pursuing in the future. That would cause us to take a detailed look at our program of studies over the next year to start thinking about how we can give kids the opportunity, maybe, for example, if you're in the STEM and computer science pathway, we want to give you the opportunity to take extra computer science classes, so maybe we back off on your social studies requirements. Certainly, we would make sure we maintain what PDE requires of us, but as you know, and we've talked about before, Quakertown does require more credits than the state does. So we would be able to shift our priorities for students who were committed to staying in one of these pathways. So we're excited about that. that cover everything?
Yes, you
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
Can I ask one clarification then to what we're approving here tonight? You mentioned that there are a couple things you still want to discuss with the teachers. Okay. Is anything what we're approving tonight, are terrible English, are any of the items we're approving tonight, items you're still going to be discussing with the teachers? In other words, are we approving something tonight that we may have to revise immediately?
No, so I removed all of the course descriptions. Actually, I had Mr. Evans do it. I don't want to take credit because he had to go in and fix the document for me. So I will, full disclosure, I needed help on that today. We removed all of the course descriptions so that what you're approving is all of the names which have already been established, the courses themselves, and all of the other information. The course descriptions, which I think we need a little bit more time to kind of talk through, and also any new additional courses that they came up with are not listed in there now, so that they would be approved as additions at the December 5th meeting rather than amendments to what you're approving this evening.
So again, there's nothing in what we're approving tonight that is currently under discussion with the teachers?
That's correct.
Okay.
Good question, Mr. Jackson. Thank you.
Vote on it tonight?
Repeat the question, Mr. McCucci?
He said, how, do we have to vote on
I
it
said if the
tonight?
document's not ready, do we have to vote on it?
You don't have to vote on it. It's actually fairly typical that we don't have the program of studies ready this early in the year, and in the past, we've approved additions through April. I'm hoping to have all of the additions approved early enough that the team at the high school can have students start to schedule in December. And so having the bulk of it approved now is helpful in terms of making sure that we have our scheduling screens set up and everything ready to go for presentations. It's not necessary if you'd prefer it all to be done at once, but it would be. No, we can amend it at any time.
I have a couple questions, if that's okay. So the Keystone exams, did we have anyone, because that I know is not a state requirement, correct, to graduate?
So there's a couple things with that are some misconceptions. Participation in the Keystone exams is what we are judged on at the state level. So we need to have as high a possible number of students taking the Keystone.
Right.
What is not required by the state right now is that students have to pass them to graduate. However, the board made that policy. So right now in Quakertown, you do have to either pass the Keystone exam or show proficiency in another means. And we have a variety of ways that we do that.
I'm sorry, I'm totally kind of asking you this on a whim. Did we have anyone last year that couldn't graduate due to that?
We did.
How many?
I would want to double check. It was definitely less than 5, and I want to say 2. One student I worked with actually over the summer from 2 years ago, it was brought to my attention. She came in and worked with me to make sure that she could reach proficiency, and then we gave her diploma from last year, and then we had one student who finished at the academy with his work.
So they can, so it sounds like what they do is they don't maybe graduate at that moment, but they can after they finish completing that.
That's correct. And we do have a number of students for whom participation in the graduation ceremony is not of interest. And so they work through July to get their work done or to get their other requirements done. And then they still receive the physical diploma. They just don't participate in graduation.
Mitch, I'm going to ask you just because I always feel like go-to. Do you feel like that's a good requirement to have to pass the Keystone?
Yeah, I do, really.
Okay. I'm just curious about that.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but if I could just add, we do have multiple pathways for students to find that success. So, for instance, if we have students who maybe are in some of our replacement classes and struggling, they can show proficiency through their final exam grade. We have students in our ESL program who can show proficiency through some of their other language tests. So we did, a couple years ago when we worked with the prior board on this, we did try to make sure that the purpose of it was to ensure that kids were leaving with skills and not that they were good test takers. So we do have some things in place to make sure that it remains on student learning and not just on the test.
Okay, good.
Thank you for explaining that.
Yeah. And what other areas do we have? You mentioned science was one of them. What other areas that are we a little bit more strict on academically than what the state requires?
Sure. So in general,
Or social studies? Oh.
the state requires 4 English and 3 of each other core subject. They also require just 1 credit in health and phys ed combined, and fewer electives. Is that right, Mr. Evans? I think it's 21 total credits they require instead of 24. So we added in 4 of each core class. Then last year, if you remember, we changed it to be 7 total math and science. So you can either have 4 and 3 or 3 and 4. So we have gone back and forth on those requirements, and it's difficult to say what's important and what's not, because obviously we think all of it's important. We want all of that learning. If you're going to say you don't need 4 years of social studies, then what don't they need to know? Do they not need to know about government? Do they not need to know about history? Do they not need to know about world cultures? It becomes very difficult to kind of pick and choose what's most important. And with 24 credits, which is our requirement, we can afford ourselves the opportunity to offer it all to them. So the idea behind the pathways is not to reduce opportunities for students. It's to try to focus some. The general diploma would still be available to any student who didn't choose to go the pathway. But similar to the technical school student who maybe focuses their time and attention on their trade, we would be allowing students to focus their time and attention on an area that they think might be of interest.
I would really like to see us require some kind of course on basic things. Like, for instance, I know personal finance is not a requirement, right?
It is not. We do offer it, and it's a popular elective, but it's not a requirement.
I mean, I can't tell you, excuse me, how many parents are like, bring back the basics for kids they don't know about, you name it, whatever. So anyway, I digress.
We actually had that conversation a number of years ago. Mr. Anderson will remember at the Education Committee, we heard from students, we heard from parents on and off about making that a full-time requirement. And it really came down to making the choice about students choosing that over another elective, and then also the staffing, because having every student take that business course would require us to hire more business teachers.
Thanks for the background.
No question, but I love the fact that you're collaborating with the music department. That's great.
And I really, if I may, I really like the idea of the individual pathways. I think it's probably not unique to our district, but I know that it's not common. So I think that it's awesome.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting conversation when you guys had it in the Education Committee meeting. Just the success that other districts have had when they've implemented it and how it's kind of really just taken off. So that's awesome you guys are putting that in.
Thanks. And a lot of success in Berks County with their Berks Career Ready program that the Bucks County group is now trying to replicate, and Mr. Evans and myself are part of that task force. And it's really exciting to be able to be one of the districts who is starting to move it forward rather than to continue to talk about how it might be nice. It's a lot of work, and it's been a heavy lift to talk about what that would be, but we're very fortunate to have partnership with the high school also, and Matt's blessing, not only blessing, but also support and active participation with his team this year on actually taking that work we've been doing over the last couple of years and running with it. So we're thankful for that.
And cherish the asterisks so that the actual tough, challenging conversations can happen, because that's where you have to storm, and you have to sort of duke it out and fight for understanding each other's positions.
That's
and,
right.
Not just get it along with mamby-pamby stuff, but actually sometimes dig into it, and you'll end up in a much better place. So
I agree. I appreciate, and I want to say that I know that some of the music teachers had said they were going to be here this evening, and I'm sorry that they're not, but I appreciate their passion for their job, and I hope that they appreciate the passion for mine, and that's where the conversation comes.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Hoffman. Okay, we've had the motion and the second and the discussion. All those in favor of approving the Office of Teaching and Learning consent agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. This brings up the public comment on policy and programs items being presented for a vote tonight. Okay, the policy and programs consent agenda consists of approval of the policy committee recommendations, which Ms. Weed discussed earlier. So do I have a motion to accept the policy and programs consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Mr. Anderson, second?
Second.
Mr. Jackson, discussion. All those in favor of accept?
What, go?
Discussion. Can we have some? Okay.
I didn't hear anybody, that's why.
No, well, it was only like, you gave like a nanosecond to respond.
Other than that, I can't do anything in a nanosecond.
Well, by way of background, I think our chief operating officer should outline for us how much lunch debt, because that's partly what prompted this policy, has gone up in this district and unpaid.
Sure.
And
And I think some-
uncollected over the past 2 or 3 years.
And some context maybe, because I think it has come up quite a bit.
Yeah,
Would be
so this was discussed, I believe it was in February at the Finance Committee meeting. We had seen the debt going up much more quickly than we had seen it in prior years. And a lot of that was due to the Act 55 law that went into effect in 2017. So when we
And
presented
that's commonly known as the
lunch shaming law.
shaming law, which
Yeah.
which says what?
So it used to be that if a student didn't have enough money to pay, you were able to give them an alternative meal. So that went away, so you have to give every child a meal, regardless of whether or not they pay for it. So we saw the debt going up, like I said, at a much more quicker rate than we've seen in prior years. So when we presented that at the Finance Committee, we explained how that worked from a financial perspective. So federal regulations don't allow the food service debt to just continue on and on and on. We have to make a transfer from the general fund to pay for that. So what that means is the general fund, which is funded through taxpayer dollars, is now funding that debt, which this year we budgeted money for it actually in the budget. The debt last year, by the end of the year, was $27,000, somewhere in that neighborhood. I did provide everyone a breakdown of that debt from last year. If you're interested, it was in front of you in your packet. I think it was the second page in your packet. And then at that Finance Committee, the committee recommended it be handed over to the Policy Committee for consideration on whether or not we need to do anything about that from a policy perspective.
And can you explain too, because I think this is important, I think one thing I'm proud of this district that we try to do is work with parents, and we send out communication letters. We try to help those who need free and reduced lunch. They need, those who cannot afford lunches, we attempt to give them some information on how they can apply for those programs. And, we're really trying at least to give people
Yes.
help that need it.
So correct. So about 32% of our students are on the free and reduced program. So those are not the students that are incurring debt that I just referenced. They are free, as it states, and we receive a subsidy from the state reimbursing us for that. For individual families that do have a debt, we send a letter to them every 2 weeks. And I did provide that letter in your packet as well. It does provide some information on how you can apply for free and reduced. There's a couple of different ways. There's the majority of our students who are on free and reduced are direct cert, so we get that information directly from the state. They tell us they're free and reduced based on the SNAP program, which is the food service or food stamps program, or if they're on Medicaid. So they automatically qualify, and the state tells us that. Then families who don't qualify under direct cert can actually fill out an application that is received by my office. They review it, they plug the numbers that the parents submit in the application into our system, and it will tell us whether or not they qualify for free and reduced lunch. And then we obviously go through the communication process with them from there.
Now, we've always had the policy where this is not changing. I just want to clarify. We've always had the policy where we could, it says, pardon me, as far as the obligations, we could, let me read this correctly. Consequences shall include but are not limited to. The ones that talk about activities, that is not new. The only thing that we're really adding, just so I can provide some clarity to the rest of us here, is if you exceed $1,000, then that goes into collections. Is that accurate? No?
I believe you had two questions there about enforcement of activities and then going into collections, if you would ask the collections piece.
Yes,
I know that's
we've
new.
never had that in any of our policies, and I believe this policy has that set at $1,000. Last year, no student reached $1,000. There were a few students that exceeded $500. The way we used to handle it at the end of the year, that debt was wiped clean on the food service books. To think about it in a different way, the general fund buys that debt from the food service fund. However, we didn't continue to try to collect it because there was no real mechanism to do that. If this policy were approved, let's say this year that same family had $500 debt, next year they have another $500 debt, at that point, collectively, between the 2 years, they would exceed the $1,000, and under this policy, we would have the ability to send that to collections.
So the most important thing I think for the public to know is we will never deny a child a lunch.
That is correct. This has nothing to do with whether or not a student would be served a meal.
But as far as going back to the activities piece, is that new to this policy, or I thought that it was already existing?
Remember this afternoon, I did a survey of all the principals, and what I learned from past practice that not until they get to the high school has it become an issue, and it's mostly a participation in graduation. As you saw in the policy change or the solicitor's feedback about transcripts and all that, can't deny students that. So that was scrubbed and scratched from the policy that you first saw. But it's the activities at the end. Mr. V, anything else to add to that?
No, the student debt is really not taken into consideration. My understanding is only for students walking.
Okay. Now, but
So that's been our practice.
But is that new to this policy? Is that what you're saying?
The policy that's in there that it could be considered as a opportunity, yes, the language in there is new.
Okay.
Yeah, we did add that at the policy committee, I believe.
I think in item number 3 in the second line, I don't think you mean appointed. I think you mean approved. You look at number 3. Typo, obviously, because I don't remember seeing. So I think you should, when you get to that point, just either administratively or by amendment, add the word approved as opposed to appointed.
Nice catch, Attorney Garden.
So do we need a separate motion to do that?
Well, it should be motion to amend so as to number 3, remove appointed and add
Okay.
Approved.
Okay. Do we do that before the overall vote?
Yes.
Okay. Yep.
I'll make a motion to fix the typo.
I'll second it.
Okay. All those in favor of fixing the typo, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
So it is interesting that the bulk of the debt, I'll say a quarter of the debt is at the high school level, right? So those are the folks who I would hold accountable. The younger kids, I wouldn't hold accountable, right? The high school kid, part of our mission is to not only create college and career-ready kids, right, but it's knowledge, habits, and skills. One of the skills is you get a sandwich from McDonald's, you pay for it, right? That's a kind of a normal citizenship thingy to do. High school kid, I'd hold accountable. The young kids, yeah, I don't know why people don't pay it. I don't know. I'm not close enough to it.
Sir, I'm concerned about the words to making sure it's appropriate. We're not holding the students accountable.
I understand.
This is an adult.
I understand, but
about parents accountable.
But the point is that even at the high school level, at least they're somewhat more mature to be able to maybe beat up their parents. And I don't mean that literally. I mean, hey, Dad or Mom, give me the money. This is terrible. We've got this kind of, but it's not. The debt's actually the lower levels, which make me wonder if we do any kind of intervention or try to
Well,
do more than just a letter going home? Because, maybe they actually are in need. But
I can tell you, just on personal experience, based on my daughter, she had library fines out the wazoo at POF Elementary School. And she, got a note that she never told us about. And then we learned about it because she wasn't going to be able to.
You learned about it in high school?
No, we learned about it like when she was in 5th grade. And it was taken care of. I mean, this is a family responsibility. I do not view this as punishing the kids.
No,
at
I'm
all.
not talking about punishing the kids,
Yeah.
but
And
certainly.
I don't think this policy does that.
Yeah, so-
It instills, responsibility. That's something that we all should be caring about.
Well, I don't know that it
teaching our
does instill
kids.
responsibility. I'm not sure how. I mean, does the child know?
Well, yeah, when they're not allowed to go on a class trip or go to a
Exactly.
school dance,
That's
go
what
to
I was
any of
gonna
the school
say.
events. I mean, you're certainly not pushing it's not unconsequential to the child that the parent has a debt.
I thought we
The
just
child
heard from
is-
I thought we just heard from the principal that they've never enforced any recourse against the child.
It's right here in writing and what we're going to pass tonight.
No, I understand what the policy says.
Or what?
The
She's
policy
on the
has said that in the past. It's my understanding. I'm simply stating that our principal has indicated at the high school level, they've never used that punitive measure against the child. I understand what the policy says.
I think that's fantastic, don't get me wrong, but we're going to pass it again. I mean, the way it's written.
Well, we're going to vote on it. We don't know if it's going to pass.
Well, the other issue, the thing I would say is, I was looking at the policy, and the one of the things that caught everybody's attention was the idea of sending things into collection. And that's got a lot of people buzzing about what they think of that. But it's interesting to note that the limit that they set upon that would trigger the idea to go to collections is $1,000. Now, $1,000 to adults sitting around this room goes, well, that's a lot, but, it's not out of control. But if you take a look at what that means in the lunch debt, I'm speaking about the lunch debt. Remember, this policy is not unique to lunch debt. There's a lot of things you could do to accrue debt owed to the school. Lunch is just one of 6 that are in the policy. But if you look at the lunch debt, our lunches, I believe, are still under $4. Mm-hmm. That means a student would have to go 250 days without paying for lunch before they hit that number. Now, Mr. Schock indicated that we have 32% of our population at the free and reduced lunch level right now?
That is correct, yeah.
Okay, so
It
we're
fluctuates, but around
already
there.
given 32% of our people free and reduced lunches.
We're not giving it to them, we're being reimbursed by the state.
Correct. Somebody's paying to have these kids have free and reduced lunches. We send out letters. Mr. Schock indicated every 2 weeks, we're sending out letters to notify the parents that, hey, you have got lunch debt. If parents are ignoring our concerns for 250 days in a row, or spread over 6 years for all I care, I mean, I appreciate, and we're never denying the kids a lunch. As far as I know, we're not depriving them of anything. I haven't heard, but my point is, 250 days?
Right, I know, but the irresponsible parent, the child should not have to pay the price for the irresponsible parent who's not making good on the debt. Now, granted, I think the child, especially in high school, shares some sort of the responsibility. You know whether or not you're going to go to school that day, whether your parent said that, you can buy lunch. But I would like to think that would be the case in most cases. But the way this is being presented, the way this is written, I'm very uncomfortable with it. I'm not uncomfortable with the debt being sent to collections, but I am uncomfortable with 4.1 and 4.3. And I would like to, can I make a motion? Sure. I would like to make a motion to strike 4.1 and strike 4.3 before we vote on this.
If we strike those, does someone want to second that? If we strike those, what options do you suggest how to collect this debt? We owe a duty to taxpayers.
And we are already selling them the
We need to be
questions.
responsible.
Well, quick point of order to our solicitor. If a motion is made, must it be seconded before we can discuss it?
Well, he needs to make the.
I'll
motion
second.
which he has. It's been seconded.
Okay, we have a motion and it's been seconded, so
It would be to amend the current version before you by removing 4.1 and 4.3.
This
You have
is,
no
this
teeth
is.
in the policy
ahead.
otherwise.
Then-
guys.
then-
I mean,
then there's
that's
no
really
teeth,
tough.
yeah.
That really.
That
Here's what we're
eliminates the
talking about.
policy.
We're not talking about folks that can't afford it.
Right.
Those folks are taken care of. The second part to that is, so this is not the poverty group. This is not the group that that we send a letter out to and says, maybe I didn't meet that qualification, but they meet our qualification. They haven't done that either. So what do you have left to do to collect the money that's owed? And it doesn't stop. I mean, it doesn't stop at just a lunch debt, right? We issue computers to kids today. So what if the kids stop returning?
And look at the
computers?
6 categories.
Where
It is that. There's 6 categories there, including as the mother of a athletic kid who was in varsity sports, she got a lot of athletic gear in soccer and uniforms, et cetera, that she had to return at the end of the year, or she was charged money. We would have been charged money, as we should be, Mr. Ogmanowitz, as we should be. Now, if we had not returned that equipment or we had not paid for it, I do not have a problem that she shouldn't have walked through graduation. That is a consequence of being a deadbeat and not fulfilling your obligations. And when we have this kind of debt that is, not being paid by these students. I'll give you another example since my daughter just graduated a year and a half ago. I talked to her about this week, getting her feedback. I said, when you were in the high school, did you know people that because this whole free lunch, the act was in effect during the time she was in high school, so she experienced it for 2 years. Did you know people that would just get lunch and never pay for it? And she goes, absolutely, because they knew they could. And these were people from middle to upper middle class families that absolutely could afford to pay. They were just being irresponsible. So we need the tooth in the policy, and if we're going to eliminate that, then we might as well not pass this policy.
I have a couple of, one question would be, this table that you provided us is meal debt. So do we know what's the percentage of total debt and how much of that is represented by meals versus computers and books and sports equipment?
No, so from my office's perspective, we only keep the data on the meal debt. Debt for something like a computer is kept with Mr. Kuzo in his department. If there's something like a textbook, that's kept at the building level. So right now, there's no central warehouse where it's all collected. Obviously, we'll have to look at that internally if this policy is passed, because that will now all be needed to add together.
Okay.
Currently, we have bits and pieces in Power School over time.
Okay, so the next thing I want to say is, if we looked at the debt and we drew a graph from pre-lunch shaming Act 55 to post, is it pretty stark? Like, is it a square wave?
It's pretty
Boom, boom.
big, isn't it? Yeah, it's big.
Right?
Yeah, over the last 3 years,
so there's
it's
a
doubled
working,
almost every year. Yeah.
So there might be a working hypothesis to your point.
Yes.
You raised some anecdotal evidence.
I raised it
let me just
because,
finish.
yeah, talking to
You raised
my
anecdotal
teenager.
evidence. Yeah, but it's just one person's opinion and talking. But the point is, the data shows an increase happened coincident with Harrisburg putting another feel-good act on. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of unfunded mandates, like kids should be educated. It's mildly funded by the state. But the point is, that's a hypothesis, right? And so how can we test the hypothesis that it's truly people taking advantage of it that otherwise could pay? So again, we are charged with raising, helping produce engaged citizens. This is bad behavior, and should it somehow be on us to out the behavior and help demonstrate. Sometimes even, I had some high school friends that some of their parents were, a little questionable. And when you're older, you can recognize, hey, you know what, luck of the draw, sometimes, our parents don't always do the right things. So if there are parents who are literally taking advantage of this, and I don't know the answer, but that's a hypothesis that you're putting forth, that the folks actually could afford this, and they're just not, because, hey, go ahead, stop me. You can't.
Right. And then I think that's the issue, right?
So
the
do we-
issue
how do
is
we test that
It
hypothesis?
feels terrible because there are a subset of people that we're talking about here that may try to beat the system, right? So, and I think back to when I went to school and you got issued a textbook. First off, if it wasn't covered, you got in trouble for that.
Mhm.
And then at the end of the year, if it
Remember
was
that?
marked up, dinged up, written on, I mean, you had certain rules that you had to abide by, and then you put the textbook back, and the following year, the next class got it. And you had to do that, or you got charged for the book. And that was something that every kid knew. It
Or
was-
library fines.
Yeah,
Remember
I mean,
library
you knew
fines
about that.
when you didn't return a
And
book.
parents knew that, because they would
Yeah.
help you, with the bags and cutting out, and making your covers.
I could still do it today.
I think that this is, we're talking about a smaller, group of people, but this is folks that can afford it. This isn't the poor in the community. I don't think we're ostracizing people by saying that, look, and if we are talking about that group, we have a mechanism that we're taking care of them, right?
So-
If that person's on the line and doesn't know what to do, come and talk to us, right?
Do we have a way to test that?
Right here.
Do we have a way to test, like, you've got almost 500 kids. Do we have a way to test, a means test? I know it's probably illegal, but is there a way to test the hypothesis that these are actually parents who do have the means, or should we just not bother about it because it's only 27,000? And it's a drop in the bucket, but.
I just want to say that I take issue with the word deadbeat. I take issue with your assumption that these people can afford it, because that opinion is it objective or subjective? Forgive me. It's your opinion. You don't know what these people are going through. And these children.
I do not know, David, but what I'm saying is that the assumption that they can't afford it is also an opinion. And so what I'm saying is we have a mechanism in place today that takes care of our poverty group.
Okay.
We know that, right? So the assumption is an assumption either way. All I'm saying is, and we have it in the language here, that the district reserves the right to consider mitigating circumstances before implementing consequences. So if the folks came to you, oftentimes what you find out in problems like this is nobody wants to take the next step and come in and have a conversation. We see it all the time. If you simply came in and had a conversation and said, this is my circumstances, I can guarantee that I think people around the table would say, okay, let's work out a deal. Maybe we even get rid of the debt. And we reserve that right. It's right here in the language. But for people to take advantage of the system, and the taxpayers are paying for it.
No, I get it.
The same people who may not be able to afford the lunches are getting taxes
And hear me
thrown
out.
on them.
And I don't completely disagree with you guys, none of you. But my point is, and I even heard Dr. Horner say, the child won't know. Well, again, excluding them from these things, and your opinions that there would be no teeth. The teeth is that the parent is going to get sent to collections. That is the teeth. You're holding, spite over their child's head that they have $1,000 debt. And that is my perception of this.
I think two things, though. It says that district reserves the right to consider mitigating circumstances. So it's not automatically going to enact that piece of it for the punishments. But then if you look on the other side, too, 80 students make up 80% of the debt. So out of that 464, you're probably looking at 80 out of that group that the district will make a case-by-case decision on that. It just gives them the opportunity to use that if they need it.
It's a tough one because, last comment I'll make it, it's a tough one because I understand both sides of it. I don't feel like a student should be penalized for their parents' behavior or maybe irresponsibility, because if you have a circumstance, we'll work with you, but you can't ignore us. But then the second part of me is how do you get them to pay?
Well,
if you don't
Mr. Kern may only think my daughter's only just one opinion or one data point, but gosh, she knew a lot of kids in the high school and went to there for 2 years and graduated pretty recently. So I think it's more than one data point. So
Okay.
I do think that's out there. And those of you that don't have teenagers yet, wait.
What about if we change the language to say these punitive measures only applied to high schoolers?
I'm good with that, for sure.
Because they're more close to being an adult and getting to recognize what's good behavior in adults, including their own parents.
What if we change the language to also lower the $1,000 and strike the other two?
You do have a motion on the table you want to address first.
We have a motion on the table to strike 4.2 and 4.1 and 4.3. So let's
You can always remove it and then recommend a different motion.
let's complete that process. Then we'll vote on the policy as it exists. If it doesn't pass, then we can refer it back to the policy committee again to be reviewed and rewritten.
I think we had looked at $500, and I don't know what the reasoning why we upped it. Was there a reason for that?
Unfortunately, I
Mr.
wasn't
Shaw?
at that meeting. I believe it was in there at one point at 500.
It was.
I'm not sure why the committee recommended moving it up to.
I
to
can't remember why it was raised.
Yeah, I
but
apologize. I don't know either.
Somebody suggested that it be raised to 1,000.
Mr. Garten, regarding the striking the amendments to the policy, should that be a roll call vote?
Well, if you don't need to make it a roll call, you can do it just by ayes and nays if you hear
ju-
conflicts.
No, I think
your-
it's going to be close, so I think we should do a roll call
Okay.
vote.
So what we're going to do now is have a roll call vote on striking numbers 4.1 and 4.3 for the policy as presented.
And a yay is yes and a nay is no, right?
A yay is,
A yay strikes it.
Amend it.
Right,
Okay.
okay. Ready?
Yay is to strike it.
A yay
Yes.
is to strike it, yes.
correct.
Mr. Akmanowitz,
Yes.
Mr. Diliberto,
No.
Mr. Anderson,
No.
Mr. Jackson,
No.
Mr. Kern,
No.
Mr. Makucci,
No.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Ms. Weed,
No.
Mr. Klein.
No.
That's 7 no, 2 yes.
So the motion to strike those two does not pass.
I'd like to make a motion to amend 4.1 to insert the word high school in front of student.
Second.
Okay.
You getting this?
I'm just writing as fast as I can. Amend 4.1, I'm sorry, to,
To insert
To
the
insert
word.
the word high school in front of student. In other words, we can penalize high
Well-
school kids, but not middle, not
Well,
elementary.
I don't like the term penalize high school kids. You know, that's not what we're doing here, but I don't like the language.
Okay, we
use.
cannot permit.
But
So-
Mr. Schock, do we have an ability to break it down as to where this debt is coming from? Is it mostly from the high school? Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
for meal debt, I can absolutely do it by building level.
So the problem with that is that the debt from the elementary school is really, really high.
Well, this helps,
10,000.
this gives Mr. Akmanowitz a little time in the sun. I mean, he has a point that you don't want to keep, certainly in elementary, kindergarten or first grade, like elementary and middle schoolers, I don't want them held accountable for their parents, but I'm willing to let a high school kid go home and go, hey, what do you mean I can't go on this trip? What do you mean we haven't been paying this? I've been coming to school for 250 days, Mr. Jackson, and I find that I can't go because you haven't been paying him. Like, I'm making some assumption that the kid's clueless. I don't know if that's right or not. But so I think a high school kid is mature enough to begin to learn the lessons of life that we need to teach them. Well, we don't need to teach them, hopefully the parents do, but that we need as part of our mission to make engaged citizens and ready for careers in college. And part of being ready for career in college is understanding when you get something like a McDonald's burger, you have to pay for it.
Well, my experience is middle school students are pretty mature too. That's my.
Well,
They
the-
are. And
You can
so,
make the next-
I
you can
think
make
if
the
we're
next
going
amendment.
to debate this, I think we should include middle school.
We have a motion on the floor.
We're still discussing, right?
That's what we're
We're discussing the
discussing.
motion still, right?
Yes.
Okay, my point is, to put high school student in front of this language indicates you care more about the elementary and middle school kids rather than the high school kids. And maybe that's a noble goal. The problem is, you're still ignoring the plain fact that we're trying to get the parents of these children. It doesn't matter whose child, doesn't matter which child, doesn't matter which grade. We need the parents to do the responsible thing and pay their debt. And changing the language in any way removes that ability from us. It just does.
So you're saying even though we don't normally use that practice, we'd take it off the table, right?
I'd like to,
Sure.
as we're really digging into the
Into the
policy.
weeds, yeah.
But it's some very important conversation. Understanding one of those things we talked about a couple months ago about the mobility rate of our district. With our poverty that has gone up about a 1% to 2% every year over the last 6 years, poverty rate's going up. The graduating class of 2019, only 67% of the students who graduated started first grade with us, only 67%. So the people will be leaving. Now, we looked at I asked Pam, our PIMS coordinator, to go drill down in the data. What's our mobility rate of our current fifth graders, where our enrollment is 100 students under where it was of the senior class, our first little class that was born back in 2008, and it's 67%. 67%, so that you're going to be, if you focus, as you're focusing on the high school students or you're focusing on elementary school students, understand there's going to be a lot of students that leave and they will still owe us money. And when they go on and they move to another school district, we do not have the legal right to hold back their files, correct?
That's correct.
So we'll be passing, we'll have debt that we'll have to write off.
Because they won't be with us the whole 12 years.
That's my point.
Yeah.
Interesting point, and thank you for bringing that up, Dr. Harder. Okay, we have a motion on the floor to insert language on 4.1, as John Kern just said. So, again, I'm going to ask for a roll call vote on this.
And I vote puts the word high school before the
Before
word
it.
student.
Okay.
Correct.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
No.
Mr. Jackson,
No.
Mr. Kern,
No.
Mr. McCucci,
You voted against your own amendment. Sorry.
Mr. McCucci,
No.
Mr. Akmanowitz,
No.
Ms. Weed,
No.
Mr. Diliberto,
No.
Mr. Klein,
No.
8 no, 1 yes.
And let it be noted that Mr. Kern voted against his own amendment.
Motion
Classic.
Hard time.
AKA magnanimous.
Classic.
Okay.
Yes.
Motion
The word of the
fails.
day, magnanimous. M-A-G-N.
I think at this point, we should have the vote on the policy.
Yes.
If there are people that think it needs to be changed in any way, shape, or form. If the policy does not pass, then we will ask the policy committee to again take it up and revise it for a future vote. So at this point, we're going to take the vote on the policy and programs consent agenda as presented. We've had the motion and the second. So at this point, all those in favor of accepting the policy and programs consent agenda as submitted, say aye.
I think it should be
Aye.
a roll call vote. No? Aye? We don't need a roll call vote?
Can I just add one last quick thing, please? Can we also include food banks and resources for some of these families to connect to, such as the Quakertown Community Outreach, and just in addition to try to do everything we can to show that these people, there are ways for them to get help?
The assumption is that this is not that population.
Yeah.
This is not that population.
We don't know
We're
that,
talking-
though. What if somebody has healthcare bills that are piling up? I mean, we just don't know. I'm just saying, let's
And we
do
have-
everything we
and I
can.
want to reiterate, we have language in there to protect people who are under hardship. We're not sitting here saying that we are, if people come forward, that's what they have to do. And then our administration reserves the right to look at that on a case-by-case basis,
Couldn't
I would
hurt, though.
imagine, right?
Right.
And so my assumption is that if somebody comes forward and says, I'm under hardship, and this is my reasoning, that our district would be empathetic towards that. Am I wrong, administrators?
No, I think
That's the way I'm reading the policy.
that's reasonable.
Correct. We would probably put what the protocol is in the AR. So the AR is going to tell us how we actually implement this policy, and we can have something in the AR that dictates how that process would work.
Right, so there would be sort of healthcare systems use them all the time, reduced cost of care programs where, this person may get 50% off their bill and this person may get 80% off their bill. It's not uncommon. And there are people this is not for the group that qualifies for Medicaid or Medicare. This is people who, may be in that intermediate phase where they are under hardships. And so I think it's important to understand we're not trying to financially bankrupt families in our district over a lunch bill. I think we're asking for the people that can afford it to pay your debt, those people that are under hardships to come forward. We will help you out. The AR will say that. And I think we move forward.
Okay. I will ask for a roll call vote on this since it's been a very, important discussion and so forth. So going back, we've had the motion and the second for the policy and programs consent agenda. So let's have the roll call vote. Again, if you vote yes, you're accepting the policy that's in front of you. If you vote no, you're rejecting it.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Jackson,
Yes.
Mr. Kern,
Yes.
Mr. Klein,
Yes.
Mr. Akmanowitz,
No.
Ms. Weed,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
No.
Mr. McCucci,
Yes.
Mr. Diliberto.
Yes.
7 yes, 2 no, the motion passes.
Okay. Next, we have some information items. Senator Mensch at the Peace Center, Quakertown Community School District recognition congratulatory letter is on board docs if you'd like to read it. There is the suspension report. There is the October 2019 student activities report, the October 2019 SRO report, and the school start times committee meeting agendas and minutes are all on board docs if anybody would like to see them. This brings us to board comment or new board business.
Just one thing, Mr. President. In front of everybody is the advertisement for the Advocacy Committee for Education. That is something the IU runs countywide about every 3 months or so, sometimes 2 months, where local school directors, superintendents, and other individuals can come down, meet at the IU for breakfast, and talk about what policies and legislative issues are going on in Harrisburg and federally, and how we can attempt to reach out to our representatives and suggest we might change their opinion or shape their opinion on those issues. That's happening tomorrow morning at the IU. It's starting at 7:30, and there's other dates on your handout for future meetings, just to highlight that in front of you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jackson. Any other new board business?
I just had two quick things. One, I just wanted to say congratulations to Cooper Diliberto. He earned his blue belt in Taekwondo tonight. So you can see it, hear his name. Two, I enjoyed serving on the board, especially with Mr. Klein's leadership as president. I know you guys have a lot of hard choices coming up in the future, but I would recommend using Mr. Klein as a benchmark when you go into selecting the president. Not going along party lines, but his even keel approach, his ability to process information and balance things out, and maintain his cool in difficult situations. And I think that's what you need in a leader, and I think it's a great opportunity for whoever runs with that piece of it. So
thank you very much, Mr. Diliberto.
And his vests.
Nice.
And I just want to say, for those of you who will no longer be here next year, thank you for your service. This is definitely, at times, a thankless job, and you receive a lot of criticism, and we don't get paid FYI, we don't.
It's pure joy.
Except for all the joys in our hearts. But I think we've come such a long way as a team. Like, we should be proud, really. And I'm going to miss those of you who won't be here. So you'll just, have to rub it in later. Be like, see what I'm doing spending my Thursday nights? So.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Diliberto. It's been great working with you. Looking forward to some brews. And Mr. Klein, thank you for your service and your excellent demeanor and being calm under fire.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I do have just a few comments I'd like to make, if you would all indulge me for just a few minutes. I was first appointed to this board in February of 2015, and I was elected in November of 2015, and I can't believe it's been that long. Almost 5 years on this board. It seems like yesterday, but tonight is my last school board meeting as a school board director. I will be opening up the December 5th meeting because I will still be the president by then. But once the new directors are sworn in, you guys will be kicking me off the dais. So. I just want to let everybody know that I chose not to seek re-election in 2019 to spend more time with my family, and not because of the impeachment hearings that you all were calling for. Okay? I would really like to thank the community for allowing me to serve them in this capacity for nearly 5 years. That means a lot to me. Also, I want to thank the administration, everyone in the administration, the teachers, and the support staff for showing me respect and kindness along the way. Your dedication and professionalism to our students and community is to be admired, truly. And I haven't forgotten our students. Having had the chance to hand out diplomas at graduations and to talk with students when the opportunities arose to do so was by far the best part of being a school director. And to the other board members, thank you so much for having entrusted in me to be your president for these last 2 years. That really meant a lot to me. I've enjoyed getting to know all of you, and I wish you all nothing but the best in the future. Being a school board member was an amazing experience for me and one that I will never forget. So thank you, everyone. Oh, come on, I'm already emotional. Thank you, everybody.
All right, draw the meeting to a close. Come on, hurry up.
Thank you. This brings us to our last public comment of the evening.
First of all, I want to say thank you to all of you for your service. I know it's not an easy job, and I do agree with you over there, Mr. Klein. I think you did a wonderful job up there, even when you're not agreeing with me. So you're a valuable asset loss. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. I understand now that you guys can't talk to me, and I understand that. It's what you were told by council. Okay? I find it funny, though, Miss Weed, that you found it important enough, even though you all said you weren't going to talk, to throw out one question about her age, which is something that I know you already knew. But it's something that you could use in your argument to get on record here, knowing that I was getting shut down right then. I don't know why you're so against us, but regardless of that, that was very unprofessional. We have overwhelming evidence to show that my daughter belongs in 9th grade. Her 1st grade assessment, her 1st grade report card, her 8th grade standardized test, her independent 8th grade evaluation, her current tech grade report before she was deleted from the system. All excellent reports from the tech school, yet no one will acknowledge this. I understand you guys can't talk. However, we would not be here if the administration would have contacted us before they acted on this. Very simple. Could have been exchange of information. We would have been able to talk because there would have been no lawyers involved. My daughter's being penalized for being an advanced student. Bullying is a topic that gets more attention now than any other time in history. There's lots of programs out about awareness and being proactive to deter it and to stop it. That's great progress, because that is a terrible thing. I am one who am a big proponent of standing up to bullies. And regardless if I'm involved or I'm being bullied, if I see it, I stand up for it. Little old ladies, people giving her a hard time on the street, I'm the guy that stands up and says, yo, get away from her. And yet here I am standing here staring bullying right in the face. This is bureaucratic bullying. Who's going to stop this bullying? Shameful. Have a good night and good luck to you guys that are leaving.
Okay, next is calendar items. On November 21st, we have the Policy Committee meeting, Board Caucus Room number 3. And then on December 5th is at 6 o'clock is the Facilities Committee meeting, which I'll be attending. And then also, sure, the reorganization and regular voting meeting here at the district. There's some information on school start times and the committee dates also. And you can see that in board docs, and then there's a link to the web page on that as well. And that brings us to Mr. Jackson's favorite part of the meeting, the adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting?
So moved.
No.
Okay.
Second.
Oh, no. All those in favor of adjourning the meeting, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.